Alors bonjour, mon nom est Véronique Maltais et j'animerai ce webinaire. Avant de laisser la parole au présentateur de la conférencière, voici quelques consignes d'usage. Donc, au bas de votre écran, veuillez fermer votre caméra si ce n'est pas déjà fait. Et pour activer la boîte de chat, cliquez sur l'icône bulle en bas à droite. Donc, la période de questions se fera à la toute fin de la présentation. Et j'aimerais mentionner finalement que la présentation d'aujourd'hui sera en anglais et qu'elle sera enregistrée. Alors, je laisse maintenant la parole à Régent Lebrun.
Oui, bonjour. Bonjour à tous. Mon nom est Régent Lebrun. Je suis directeur de recherche de la division dynamique des écosystèmes au Centre de foresterie des Laurentides. Alors, bienvenue à ce tout premier webinaire de la 37e saison des colloques du Centre des Laurentides. Durant les 36 dernières années, nous avons organisé plus de 330 conférences et cette belle tradition se poursuit. La conférence d'aujourd'hui porte sur une solution d'intelligence artificielle évolutive grâce à l'imagerie par drone pour la gestion des ravageurs et subséquemment de l'approvisionnement. Cette conférence est diffusée aux intervenants du secteur forestier, simultanément dans plusieurs sites à travers le Québec principalement et les autres provinces. Alors, c'est avec plaisir que je vous présente la conférencière d'aujourd'hui, Mme Udaya Vepakoma. Udaya est actuellement scientifique principale en télédétection chez FP Innovation. Ses recherches sont orientées sur l'utilisation du lidar 3D, 4D et d'imagerie optique de diverses plateformes pour trouver des solutions aux problèmes liés aux ressources forestières, en particulier à leur dynamique, aux menaces auxquelles elles sont exposées et à la production d'informations critiques et nécessaires à la planification opérationnelle et tactique. En établissant un programme d'application de drones, elle a été une pionnière dans l'apport de solutions à faible coût pour les opérations forestières canadiennes. Plus récemment, elle a commencé à travailler sur la perception en temps réel et la navigation autonome dans un environnement complexe non structuré. Avant de se joindre à FP Innovation, elle a travaillé comme scientifique à l'Indian Space Research, soit l'équivalent de l'Agence spatiale canadienne. Elle a aussi été postdoctorante à l'Université de Toronto en écologie du paysage, puis au Centre d'études de la forêt pour étudier les changements spatio-temporels de la tordeuse des bourgeons de l'épinette au cours des derniers siècles. Elle est titulaire d'un doctorat en sciences de l'environnement de l'UQAM avec une spécialisation en lidar et écologie des perturbations. Alors, sans plus tarder, je laisse la place maintenant à Udaya et je vous souhaite un bon colloque. Merci.
Bonjour tout le monde. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here and thank you for the invitation. And I totally appreciate to have this chance to share my work with you all. And I'm very glad this morning with a bright sun and a lot of snow, we are out to have a good Christmas. So with this positive note, I would like to start my presentation. As the title goes, I would like to give you some of the work that we are doing out here to help in early intervention strategies. That is combining a simple imagery that is coming from the drones, which is an RGB imagery, combining with technologies like artificial intelligence. How is that helping us in building some of the tools? I'm just looking at my screen. Thank you. Yeah, periodic outbreaks of defoliators, which are endemic within the natural forest, is very natural to have them, that feed on the young needles of host species, like the spruce budworm, affect large territories. So from the research, we understand that single attack weakens the trees, especially the host trees on which they are feeding on, but consecutively when they attack the same trees and affect them severely, over 4 to 5 years, this causes mortality. And if this epidemic is not contained, it can go as far as 50 million hectares of affected area, as we have seen in the previous outbreak. What does it tell us? It just not affects during the outbreak, but it carries a long-lasting, long legacies far beyond the outbreak time. Here is one example that I picked up from the New Brunswick that about 3.6 million hectares that was seen to have affected in 1975 had the legacies, and I believe has an estimated impact of potential losses going almost up to 6.7 billions. And that percolates to other areas of having a low wood supply and loss of plenty of jobs, almost like 1,500 jobs per year in something like 30 to 40 years. Close to ourselves, we are seeing this evidence of the more recent spruce budworm outbreak. It's a portrait from Quebec, as you can see, that almost 9.1 million hectares is affected in the last year with the assessment that is completed in 2022. Although we are seeing a reduction in the total area that is impacted, the damage is quite a bit completed, and we can estimate in the last 10 years, as we see from the statistics, on the average 25% more area is annually added. This doesn't mean new area is not getting affected. So tools that can help in identifying a risk of these interventions and spreading into new areas, and also finding those tools that we can salvage and recover as much of wood as possible could be very critical. With this in the background, today my agenda is to present you with 2 projects that we are doing that could help towards the early intervention. One targeting towards the pest management, another one towards the procurement management. After this, I would like to present you what are my next steps in this direction of research and open the floor to questions to you all. I would love to hear your feedback, and I would love to understand your interest in this area of research. Moving on, our first case study here, which is an adaptively intelligent defoliation detector. That is what I call it as AID for early intervention. It's supposed to be for any defoliator, but specifically I began working for the spruce budworm. And to be more specific, what we're trying to do is try to predict the tree-level annual as well as cumulative defoliation specific to balsam fir host species, which is the major host species that the spruce budworm feeds on. This work is not done alone, but in fact, it's a tremendous amount of collaboration that is coming from various research centers, universities, and other research organizations put together within the Spruce Budworm Early Intervention Strategy Network. I would like to thank all the collaborators that are working with me to make this happen, as well as the support that I'm getting from the various funders, including NRCan. Thank you so much. So this work, as I had started, it falls within the program, which is the research program for the early intervention strategies for spruce budworm, spread over several years, where a bunch of researchers are trying to address several questions that are posed in terms of identifying the early indicators of infestations to see how treatment could be initiated, what are those new tools that can help to identify these, and what should be the ecological impacts, and what are the lessons that we can take from here. And this project is one of the 10 major projects under this research program. Scientists are looking into the EIS, that's early intervention strategies, into various options that aim to either interrupt or delay the course of outbreak through targeting hotspots when the population densities are still very low. When you do that, that means we need to monitor the sites that are have the risk or vulnerability, identify those hotspots and treat them. So that way, instead of trying to protect them through the spraying of the foliage to keep them alive, probably we could go early on to contain this. So monitoring in general is being done. We have this large scale L2 overwintering L2 assessments that are being done, where probably we can pick up where those low density, still rapidly rising population, which are the hotspots. But is there any other operational way that we could pick up to understand where we could identify these hotspots? Alternate measures where spatially it is much more easier, and probably instead of containing 2 samples across space, maybe we could get a contiguous area that could be monitored is through remote sensing. A lot of work has been done by understanding the impact as a stress over the foliage and correlating it with the spectral signatures that we are getting through the remote sensing technology, especially using satellite technology of medium resolutions and or aerial surveys with much more visual assessment. But all these are able to be very successful in providing a gradient of defoliation impact, but largely focused on the period during the insect feeding. It is has a great potential and is very helpful, but these have some challenges still. These have the issues on the scale. So the gradient that we will be successfully able to distinguish is very broad range. That means the low defoliations that we are targeting, where the insect population is supposed to be low, is just less than 35% and cannot go in more discrete granularity. And also there is a lot of insistence on getting this data set restricted to the window of insect feeding. So that restricts us from also porting it to other time periods, should there be any cloud coverage and lack of data sets. Also, there has been a huge issues on getting the right training data that is well correlated or co-registered with the information that we are actually seeing on ground. So these are some of those challenges that prevented us previously in trying to make our distinction in low defoliations much more granularly. Recent technology, as you all have seen, I don't have to reiterate, the image that's coming from the drones have given us a lot of independence, a lot of degrees of freedom in trying to view the canopies from above ground, but below the cloud. We have lots of sensors that are miniaturized and put on the drones. We could have different view angles, and we have this democratization of acquiring the data, and also very accessible, very repeatable, and rich in information, which could be a platform, an intermediate platform that could help us correlate the information that is coming from ground and upscaling up to the satellite platform, which is, in my opinion, most operational platform. So this platform could have the potential to be an intermediate platform so that we could gather as much of reference data possible, and probably also have this ability to continuously acquire the sample data stream and able to learn and improve our models that could be ported to higher platforms. And they have a very high resolution data and give us a possibility of scaling up to the data that could match the higher platforms as well. With some experience that we had early on, early like 2017, 2018, the ability to distinguish gradients of impact, not just in the annual defoliation, but also a combination with annual and cumulative defoliation gave us little confidence in hypothesizing that this platform probably could be a good tool. So visually, when we see, as an example here, we could have different combinations of defoliations that could be seen, at least visually appreciated. We went further and did a little test on seeing, could we really distinguish healthy from affected areas? Can I really pick up the data, at least in the feeding time, insect feeding time, to say that we can classify or separate current from cumulative defoliation? So we did a very brief test with the existing traditional way of doing remote sensing of classifications, and tested it visually on the screen as well as verified it on the ground, and found it to be pretty promising. With this experience in the background, we defined a project goal of developing a technology, a tool, a predictive model of estimating annual as well as cumulative defoliation of major host species, especially at the moment we are targeting balsam fir. The important point is from the data that is coming from non-feeding time, so that this model could be scale, vision, as well as time invariant. Scale in the sense we could upscale from very high resolution to very low resolution data sets, so that it can be portable. Vision in terms of any time of the season, I mean, non-snow season, let's call it, but non-feeding time. And the data could be acquired in any angle. And time invariance, obviously, we were trying to say, restricting it to translate to the non-feeding time. So these solutions could be scalable to higher platforms for operational reasons, can be adaptively trained and transferred not just to the major host species, but other species, and moving on to other defoliators as well. So here is our basic approach to building this model. So on the field, we would be utilizing the ground assessment to estimate the level of defoliation at the tree level. That would be matched with data that is coming from the drone, which is captured in multi-views in multi-seasons of high resolution, and put into captured in different sites. So we'll have a cross-site model and put into a deep learning algorithm that is powered by a CNN, and extract a scale invariant defoliation map from which goes from low resolution to a high resolution image. To achieve this, we had selected 3 regions, which consists of 10 sites. The first one is the one with a low to moderate defoliation, which is within the northern New Brunswick area around Balmoral. And the areas to capture gradients from moderate to severe defoliation was in Kosapskal in Kaspisi region. And we had a separate control data set in the Laurentians. Unfortunately, by the time we started to gather the data, we were already into the epidemic, sorry about that, and could not find a healthy stand that was not affected by the spruce budworm in this recent attack. So we had to use a very similar condition one, but a little away from these sites. 20 permanent plots were laid out, and covering these plots, we have acquired drone survey in these areas, about 70 hectares, completed in 6 campaigns during the 2018 to 2021 in different months in the non-feeding times. Multi-view angle RGB data was collected from the drone. Our platform was DJI M210, which takes multiple sensors at the same time. So we also have acquired, along with the RGB, we also acquired the MicroSense multispectral data, as well as the thermal data that is coming from XT. We have also conducted similar models with multispectral, which is not, I'm not presenting at the moment. The goal was to understand how this data coming from a simple consumer grade camera could be utilized. So I'm restricting my presentation to the RGB data. We have also, in order to simulate different view angles, we have collected the data in two different ways of acquisition. One is to do a crosshatch. That means we do vertical and horizontal flight lines, as well as around the plots, we have acquired data circularly so that the same tree could be captured in multiple angles. As you can see towards the right side of my screen, you have the plot center and these images of the trees within the plot where we have laid out these stem plots are acquired in different angles. Just to give an idea of the data, the spectral signatures that were extracted from these RGB images for the trees, for which we measured the defoliation, at first glance gives us a good potential that the gradient of defoliation seems to be distinguishable across the spectral curves, both for the annual as well as cumulative defoliation. The in situ data, that is where we have the actual defoliation assessment at the tree level, was conducted in two different methods. One is the branch or shoot assessment, where the branches from the mid to top canopy were cut and almost like 25 shoots were utilized to assess the defoliation at the tree level. We have used two different methods of acquiring the branch assessment. One is through pole pruning, and we also utilize the drone sampler. But it's a very small sample, but nevertheless, last year we had this opportunity to use that. Shoots were sampled and the defoliation were assessed right on the site. We also used the binocular assessment to assess the tree at the same time. Two different viewpoints were used, two different assessors were used to get the more unbiased estimate. This was collected in support from the UNB team, Dave McLean's lab team, especially his PhD student, Sean Donovan, who helped us through the entire campaign of assessing these trees, and Rob John's team from the Atlantic had supported greatly in doing the shoot separation. And in fact, we also did some assessment on the hyperspectral data through it. Thank you so much for your support. Using the annual, at the same time when we were doing annual defoliation assessment, we also, through the branch or shoot separation, we also were able to assess the last 2 years defoliation. Using this information, we estimated the cumulative defoliation of the ith year following our own equation based on the current and the last 2 years defoliation, percent defoliation. And the coefficients that we have estimated were from the total foliage biomass that we have acquired during the 2018 data set, and versus the data that were acquired for the affected trees. Another important point and the experience that we had was in actually geolocating the tree. In our experience in the previous studies, the biggest issue was finding the tree that was measured on ground and matching it with the tree that was actually seen on the image. So this time we made as much effort as possible to actually geolocate every tree that was measured on ground, so that we remove any level of inaccuracies that could creep in due to the mismatch. So we have used ortho images and an Avenza. We have used several targets which can give us the guidance in trying to identify the right tree on the image. This way, we assign the defoliation to the crown that was measured and create a huge amount of tree library, almost like 1,500 tree crowns for high gradient, different range and gradient of these defoliation, both for cumulative and current defoliation. Here you see an example of the tree library that we've created for the cumulative defoliation. Obviously, as you're seeing, they look like a pretty nice crowns, but we also made sure that there are images that are really crooked and not really clear, but very confidently located on ground and measured. So we included trees that have a bit of noise as well, so that in reality, we should be able to pick up any kind of data that is coming. Each crown was normalized to a size of 125 by 125 pixels. They were all resized, but we made sure that the original information that is coming from the image is not distorted. On the base, you can see the distribution of the sample crowns that were finally put into our library. It is not equally distributed. It is very difficult to find. I mean, in fact, you all must be knowing much more than I do to find the right tree with the right level of defoliation. So we don't have really well-distributed sample crowns. This is the end results. And in fact, we lost some of the data set that is coming from 2021, as we noticed a lot of the shoots were very short and probably due to the cold snap or damaged. So we were unsure of using this data set. So for the time being, we have kept that aside. So with the remaining data set between 2018 and 2020, this is how the distribution of both branch and ocula look like. It is very evident that sometimes small representations are seen in this class ranges. So we had to actually merge especially the 80 to 100% defoliation class, where representations has been quite low. Using this information, we were looking into the deep learning architecture, how to train the model. So we were very clear on utilizing deep nets. These are some of the machine learning algorithm with deep reach. That means have a huge number of layers and neurons that can help us pick out the patterns, pick out the texture, and a lot of critical parameters that can help us distinguish through our subtle differences between the defoliation. We have created several input layers, like just the raw bands. We have utilized also additional layers that are coming from stress indices, almost like 6, which were shortlisted based on a previous study that we have done that could be useful for distinguishing the defoliation levels in spruce budworm. And we have also took combination of layers between raw and vegetation indices to understand which is the most optimal one. Like I said, defoliation ranges had to be merged sometimes. We couldn't use all the 7 classes that we thought. Sometimes we had to merge them to 6 or even 5 levels to see what is the best we can get. And we also know that if it is the data coming from the midst of the epidemic, we may have it is very difficult to say that the current defoliation is not what do you call conditional to the cumulative that we see on the image. So we also try to have combination of classes of current and cumulation to see how well that can work. On the image augmentation side, to increase or decrease the sample balance, we have utilized some methodologies that should be able to balance us. Also looking into the image input itself, where we were calling it as 125 by 125 size, resizing each crown could be padded around with empty pixels or could be extended without padding. So these were some of the input parameters that we were trying to put into the deep learning and use different types of architectures, all the popular ones that are present in the literature and which are based on the CNNs basically, and build the networks from the scratch to see which is the best one that will suit our need. So the selection criteria was understanding of course, the accuracy, but in the elegant and efficient way of actually reaching the training to a prediction model. Here are some of the results that we have predicted through the different networks that were used. Among that, we felt ResNet 50, that is the residual network with 50 layers in it, was the one that seems to have been the best combination for both accuracy as well as the efficiency in able to train the network. This is how the ResNet 50 architecture that implemented looked like. It's a dense block architecture, and after trials and looking into the validation data set, we felt that an additional dense block should be added to it for better results. The input to this network is a simple crown, which is a multidimensional normalized crown. And the output that comes out of this network is the crown ID with an estimated class label. So it is a classification algorithm. Validation of these models, we have split the whole data set into 70% training to 30% validation. We estimated overall accuracies with using the also precisions and recall to specific classes. And the goal was that we should minimize the chance of misclassifying low insect activity as healthy. That was the major goal, and try to see which are those models that can give us the best precision and recalls in all classes, but specific to low defoliation classes. We have also used the control data set to understand, to best validate and see are we doing well in trying to separate the data set from healthy to an affected area. And most of the time, we tried our best to bring independent data set, which is unseen by the model. As I mentioned, due to the pandemic, most of the, like any of you, we didn't have a chance to collect a lot of data in between. To start with, initially, first year, we had only 2019 data set. While waiting, we started building a cross-site model because we had almost 10 sites, but single time information, that is defoliation from the ground, was coming only from 1 year. So we started to build our model with a single time. So then populated it to understand, does this model work across different time so that we could see its time invariance? If so, what would be the mode of approach? So we did several methods. We tested it directly, like from the single time model, we just had the predetermined weights we wanted to estimate on to these 2019 to 2021 data sets to see how does it work, or should we transfer learn? That means we take 70% of the new data set that is coming from years 2020 and use only the first few channels or first 10% of the epochs to understand whether this model can do well, or just mix up the entire data from 2019 to 2021 and retrain the model. So we did different approaches to understand the time invariance and use the same data set by degrading the information progressively to see how these models can sustain the accuracies for degraded images. I will not present a lot of results out here, but most of the results look somewhat similar to what I'm presenting. This is the first data set, first model, which was the single time cross-site model that we created. As you can see, the models were independently generated for ocular as well as branch sample, and ocular that is again subdivided into annual defoliation as well as cumulative defoliation. You can see the models worked really very well. We were able to have a extremely good recall, especially for the low defoliation, almost crossing up to 88% for ocular data. The one that were trained with the branch also fared quite good with 77% in low defoliation classes. When you look into the right side of the image, where I present the confusion matrix, both for the annual and the cumulative defoliation, especially as an example from ocular, you can see that the confusion or the omission or commission classes that went along the entire range of defoliation classes is not large, and it is not a huge amount. Especially if you're looking at the cumulative, the performance seems to have been far better than the annual. So in my assessment, ocular data trained better to give good validation for us, while cumulative seems to have predicted better than annual, which is not out of any expectation, because we collected the data in the midst of the epidemic, and there is a lot of influence, and we should be doing better for the cumulative rather than the annual. But nevertheless, the model looked pretty promising. So we use these models to test on various ways of making it both time and scale invariant. I'm not presenting all the models, all the tests, all the way of extending or transfer learning to the multi-time data, but you can get a glimpse of it by looking at it with the sample information that I've provided here. As you can see, not all models are able to give good accuracies in all defoliation classes. Nevertheless, we did have some promising results coming for the recaller precision from the low defoliation classes and distinction between, once again, healthy to affected areas. So like I'm mentioning that, is there one model that I can pick? It seems not like it. And this was also expected because we didn't have well-distributed samples that are coming across the classes, where we had majority representation of the sample classes in the model obviously performed far better. So how could we resolve? There are models like stack generalization, which picks up the combination of better performing models in different classes together. So we can do a meta learning through a linear combination of these various models, which were seen to be performing better for different ranges of defoliation. So we adapted a stack generalization as a model to do this meta learning to get a better assessment or predictions of both annual and cumulative defoliation. Here is one of the independent validations that we have done of the ensemble model. In one area of the model site which was unseen by the model. We have not fed this data at all. Here, 160 trees were matched with the predictions that were made by the model. As you can see, the performance of annual defoliation, that is the current defoliation, has not been so great. But when you look into the cumulative, we have achieved quite a good result and representation of the area. These were the plots. I don't know if you're able to see my screen. Yeah, these were the plots that were measured in 2021, but we have not utilized this data at all. And this information that you're seeing is from these 160 trees that were measured on ground. But on the right side, what we are seeing is a contiguous map of an area of close to 1.5 hectares each, shows a very similar trend what we observed on ground, which gives us great confidence that these models could really work should we improve it further, at least for the cumulative defoliation. Moving on, the same ensemble model which worked very well for us, we wanted to test for its scale invariance by degrading the resolution from its original resolution, which is 2 centimeters, to almost like 48 centimeters, that sort of matches with the medium or let's say high resolution satellite data like WorldView 3. And retrained, tested the models, and also applied the predetermined weights onto these images. And we found that across the resolutions, the models sustain both the precision and the recall, which was quite interesting to see. So we used this the trained data, which is coming from degraded images, and call that as the pseudo satellite model, especially the one that is at the 48 centimeters, and try to apply the predetermined weights from this degraded resolution images to the satellite image directly that was acquired in 2015 and 2021. So these are the WorldView 3 data set across one small area, and this satellite image was normalized to match the drone imagery. On the left side, you can see how the information, the validation of this data set. Obviously, at the first instance, it didn't look anything promising, definitely not annual defoliation, but somewhat, if you have a closer look to the cumulative defoliation, we saw perhaps there is a shift in the prediction. That means one shift of the class of the defoliation range compared to the field data, probably because the data that we have used to train is ocular sampling, and maybe it had underestimated the defoliation. This is one of the conclusions that we made, but still it looks promising, probably to apply to a satellite model. In conclusion, RGB images are a great source of reference data for modeling gradient of spruce budworm defoliation, and deep learning model really helped us to distinguish low defoliated areas from healthy. There is a good promise, at least at the UAV level, at the RGB images at the platform that we are acquiring seems to be quite good. And there is a promise to improve adaptively over time. As and when we are getting this data collected, we could improve the model. And we should be able to transfer this information over to other species, to new sites, as well as extending it to upscale it to higher platforms. Moving on, the second project, which is on salvaging for procurement management, as before the fiber is not suitable for any wood industry. We have done some work. As you can see from the previous, once again, taking the lessons from the previous epidemic almost estimated 140,000 to about 240,000 cubic meters of brown wood was killed and could not make it to the industry. From the studies done in various research, that there is a very small window of opportunity that is left to use this insect affected wood for the lumber, which is about 1 to 2 years, or pulp and paper, which is slightly more, about 3 to 4 years, perhaps, which could not make it to any of this. About 2 classes could go into bioenergy. As you move into more degraded wood, the harvesting costs are also increasing. We shouldn't forget that safety concerns are also there. So it does matter for us to find the early intervention for fiber recovery as well. More recently, here is an example that the Quebec MFFP has posted on the risk of almost 30% of the affected area that could have a risk of mortality by the end of the epidemic, especially in the Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean region. Could we do something about it? Extend this work that we have done in helping early salvaging of this wood. Using the same technology, we extended it to see a very simple one. Can we do separate healthy from affected areas? So here is one level of classification we have done. We used, of course, this was validated only in 2 sites, but the model seems to have worked very well and matched very well on ground. This information was used to add a layer of what we call it as bigger assist layer to help the operator in salvaging the cut block. So we just use this information to say these are no-go areas, some are partially good, some are good to go areas. This information was to understand what is the benefit that you would get by adding the simple information of healthy versus affected areas in 2 sites. We tested with information and without this information that is clear-cut as usual to as opposed to salvaging using logging map. We found that almost about 41 cents of harvesting cost could be reduced. It looks very small, but it was just a small information that we added to it. You can imagine if you look into at the scale of the region, you're almost saving 270,000 in direct harvesting costs of acquiring this or salvaging this fiber. So we proceeded further to see that could we go move forward to understand and classify this area into much more finer information of the trees that were degraded varyingly. So we use the modified hunter class to be able to give a foliage loss index map. That could be a main indicator for understanding the tree level degradation, which is very close to the modified hunter classification. So as you can see, up to class 3, it is almost, there is a foliage that keeps decreasing to about 20% and then falls to be added 2 more classes in between, intermediate classes between 3 and 4, and try to build a very similar model, which looks pretty much like this, where we have a gradient even within the tree that can tell us how much your foliage is lost and put into different classes. You can accumulate it at the tree level to give an indication of the hunter class tree, which is the degradation level. This was validated in only 1 site thoroughly, but you can see that there were no commission or omission errors. We were able to get it. Nevertheless, this model was independently validated on ground, visually by the operators and by the foresters in about 200 hectares of area within Lac-Saint-Jean region by our industry partners. This model is integrated for salvage harvesting within their pipeline into especially Resolute is trying to use it in their planning processes at the moment. Here is an example how they would plan to do it is the recommendations that were given by NFFP to use Sentinel data using an NBR ratio, that is burnt ratio index for salvage planning, and use an additional layer with a detailed foliage loss map to provide it to the salvage operators. At the moment, I do not have any feedback from them to understand how useful this information is at the operations level, but they find it quite useful at the planning level. All this work was good, but there are certain caveats I would like to mention. That is, defoliation has been assessed only for balsam fir. We were not able to separate severely affected defoliated tree versus the dead, so it was all put together as one class. Another thing is foliage loss of coniferous trees due to coexisting disturbance could not be separated with other spruce budworm infestation. So we are assuming that what we are seeing is only through the budworm infestation. The same way, extending it, if you were able to acquire this information during the fall leaf-off season, probably we would have some mix-up with deciduous trees without any foliage on it. I'm still working on it. The work is still progressing, especially in the first talk on the defoliation assessment. We've worked only on the model side so far. The goal is to take this into various other sites, extend it to other host species, as well as to the higher platforms. This is what will be done. I'm looking for funding. We are all waiting for funding. If there's an opportunity, I would love to come back to extend this work. I would be happy if any one of you would be interested in joining with me in this endeavor. We have a wealth of data and experience. Huge amount of UAV data was acquired along with some amount of satellite data. Lot of label crown libraries available. I would love to see somebody utilizing this, joining hands with me in extending it, and also receive some feedback from you and ask questions, and I hope I'll be able to respond.
Thanks a lot, Udaya, for your presentation. It was super interesting.
Sure.
Maybe we could just stop the sharing for the discussion period.
Okay, just a second. Wonderful.
Wonderful, yeah. Donc, pour ceux et celles qui se sont joints à nous un peu plus tardivement, là, je me présente, Véronique Maltais, puis j'animerai la période des questions. Avant de débuter, cependant, j'ai quelques messages d'intérêt et puis des règles d'usage à vous partager. Donc, vous pouvez tous dès maintenant là, activer votre vidéo là, si vous le désirez. Si vous désirez obtenir aussi une attestation de formation continue, notamment en lien avec le règlement de la formation continue obligatoire des ingénieurs forestiers du Québec, en fait, l'unique façon est de compléter l'attestation de participation avec le lien URL et le code d'activité. Bien important, là, le code d'activité que vous trouverez à l'instant dans le chat. Donc, je vous mets ça. Donc, voilà. Et bien sûr, là, vous pouvez poser votre question dans la langue officielle de votre choix. Il y a deux façons, soit verbalement, en cliquant à droite de votre nom dans la liste des participants et en sélectionnant l'icône main levée. Donc, pour faciliter la gestion, là, je vais vous nommer, puis vous n'aurez qu'à enlever votre mode sourdine en cliquant sur l'icône micro. Par contre, après avoir posé votre question, là, je vous demanderai de vous remettre en mode sourdine. Puis, nous souhaitons que vous posez une question à la fois là, pour laisser la chance de bien répondre à votre question d'abord pour le conférencier, mais aussi pour laisser la chance à d'autres de poser leurs questions. Et la deuxième option, en fait, c'est bien sûr de l'écrire dans le chat. Donc, sélectionnez l'icône en forme de bulle en bas à droite pour l'activer si ce n'est pas déjà fait. Et en terminant, je vous demanderai de vous identifier clairement en donnant votre nom et l'organisation que vous représentez. Donc voilà la période, je vais juste rétablir le son pour tous. Donc vous aurez la possibilité de vous démuter, d'enlever la sourdine. Puis voilà, donc on démarre la période de questions et d'échanges. Donc je ne vois pas de questions pour le moment.
Oui, bonjour Goudaria, j'aurais une question. En fait, so I'm going to switch to English for you
Thank you.
to understand the question. So, so I understand that your method is bringing a lot of precision for at the plot level, let's say for estimating the defoliation. I was wondering what's the range, the potential range of resolutions that could be used at the higher platforms, like for satellites, that could have the potential to, to inform from, from space as opposed to those drones at the plot level.
Thank you for your question. Very interesting. Yes, the work that I'm doing is currently at the tree level. So what we have done at the moment is taking the information at the tree level and transforming it to the tree level at the satellite level. Today, at least can confidently say resolutions like that come from Worldview 3 dataset should be good to talk at the tree level. But I think, is it practical? Should we stay at the tree level or go at the plot, stand level, 20 by 20 meters? Maybe should be fine to do it. At the moment, I was trying to keep the accuracies high, so stuck to the tree level of information. I'm pretty confident that we should be able to go almost up to medium resolution satellite data if we are taking at a little larger scale.
Thank you.
D'autres questions? Oui, Isabelle, Chaîne.
Bonjour, Udaya. Thank you for an excellent presentation. It's a lot of work and very, very interesting. And I see connections that could be made on characterizing internal log or tree or log quality to try to match with the model that you are developing at the plot level and scaling up to other levels. So I'm sure we'll be in touch to discuss further because we are evaluating, we are at the moment with Christian Hébert on a project on evaluating the spruce budworm, the wood quality of spruce budworm attacked wood, then we could make connections probably with that. So we'll be in touch again. Thank you for an excellent presentation.
Thank you, Isabel. Totally appreciate your feedback on that. And yes, I do see your point. I was reading about your work. Definitely, there is a great possibility of coming together to connect the work that you're doing on the wood quality assessment in terms of the degradation with the work that I'm doing. Certainly, I'll get in touch with you.
Thank you.
Alors, pour le moment, il n'y a pas de questions dans le chat. It was really clear, Udaya. There is no question in the chat, so.
Or confusing. I would really appreciate it. Well, you have my email ID. Anytime you could connect, come back to me. If there is an interest, both in knowing more about it or clarifications or wanting to join for various other use cases as well, like I would be very happy.
Thanks a lot. We have a question, Nathalie Isabelle. Go ahead.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. It was an excellent presentation. Actually, we are starting a project working with plantation. I see that you are very advanced in terms of data analysis. So we'll probably be in touch with you because that type of work is what we are looking for. The phenotyping part is really hard in terms of we are working on the breeding aspect with adaptive traits. But still, we use the drone, the hyperspectral sensors, and I think that we have a lot in common. So, as Isabelle mentioned, there are connections that could be made. So we'll be in touch, and you did a very excellent presentation. Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Natalie. I look forward to working with you on it anytime. Wonderful to hear that.
Donc, je surveille le chat. On n'a pas d'autres questions pour le moment. Je vous laisse encore quelques secondes, une minute pour réfléchir.
Peut-être une autre.
Yeah.
In terms of data analysis, actually, where are you doing where do you run physically your data analysis? Do you have a special network or, yes, I would like to have more detail because there's a lot of images and that could be, I would say, a challenge.
Yeah, we have a high-end computer. It's locally done, not on the cloud. We have a high-end workstations, thankfully. So that was good enough to support it. There is no need for, just the point is we are not doing anything on real time. So it doesn't matter if the training is taking, or overnight, we just let it run. So we're not having a very, very sophisticated technology, but just a good system that supports the processing. So I can provide you with the details.
Okay, thank you.
Everything is done locally.
Excellent. Je veux seulement vous faire un rappel de bien prendre en note le code d'activité pour ceux qui désirent avoir une attestation de participation. Là, elle est présentement dans le chat et c'est l'unique façon de pouvoir compléter l'attestation avec le lien URL. S'il n'y a pas d'autres questions, en fait, je vais prendre un instant pour remercier Oudaya pour sa présentation. Merci beaucoup de vous être joint à nous. Une solution d'intelligence artificielle évolutive grâce à l'imagerie par drone pour la gestion des ravageurs et subséquemment l'approvisionnement. Donc, c'était le titre de la présentation d'aujourd'hui. Et en terminant, j'aimerais vous inviter au prochain colloque qui aura lieu jeudi le 1er décembre, donc dans 2 semaines, et qui s'intitule « La génomique au service de la gestion des ravageurs forestiers, simple chimère ou réalité ». Donc, la conférence sera donnée par Michel Cusson, chercheur scientifique au Centre de foresterie des Laurentides du Service canadien des forêts et aussi professeur associé. Donc, j'aimerais aussi vous inviter à surveiller également notre fil Twitter et LinkedIn pour en savoir plus. Et merci à tous, en fait, pour votre participation. Puis une bonne journée. Puis, thanks a lot, Oudaya, for your presentation.
Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you, Veronique, for the opportunity. And I'm glad. Okay, bye-bye.
Merci.